Hi, and welcome to the latest episode of Infinite Football. I am your host, Ryan O'Hanlon, creator of the newsletter No Grass in the Clouds, and this week got recurring guests, but not our typical two other hosts. We need to bring in the experts this week. Noah Davis, whose name currently in front of me appears as Taylor Twillman. What's up, Noah?
Not much. What are we doing here, I think is the question.
That's if one person understands that joke, I'm happy. And then that other sort of snickering you heard in the background was Andrew Helms. How are you doing, Andrew?
Awake,
That's good.
After a long night of CONCACAF.
Did you guys kind of just stay awake after the game and sort of start work the next day?
Yeah, I was so pumped up from the big 4-1 victory in Honduras that couldn't sleep. Went for a run, ran around the neighborhood just like Greg Berhalter in Nashville.
Oh my God.
Did you see that Weston McKennie's dad retweeted some guy who was like, "Why is it a violation for Greg to go for a run around Nashville? But the kid can't have a Nashville bachelorette party come to his hotel room in the middle of the team bubble."
Spot the lie there. You can't.
I was like, do we need to take a remedial lesson on airborne viruses with Weston McKennie's dad here?
Yeah, so Andrew and Noah are here. Obviously, we're just going to spend an hour sort of discussing sort of Weston McKennie, sort of his responsibilities as an adult, his responsibilities as the face of the U.S. men's national team, his responsibilities as a spokesperson for the whatever corporation owns Chipotle, and sort of whether who owns Chipotle?
McDonald's, right?
Oh my God! That's like being the McDonald's and U.S. men's national team spokesperson essentially makes you president. I feel like. So we're just going to kind of break down all of the ways that we feel like Weston McKennie let us down over the next hour. Actually,
McDonald's bought Chipotle and then sold it back to the original owners. I just Googled. So apologies for the misinformation.
Is that a common business practice? Just buying a company, then selling it back?
You should ask Barcelona about that.
Yeah. Barcelona and Manchester United both know that, and Chelsea also know that really well. No, we're obviously, none of us have any opinions on the whole Weston McKennie thing, I don't think, other than kind of laughing from afar is mainly my main opinion.
Yeah, a lot of scolding going on, I'd say.
Yeah.
I think it was not a good thing to do. I hope this ends it. Like, I don't think anyone's going to be solved. No one's going to come out looking good if we continue, if we're still talking about this in 2 months or 2 days.
You don't think it should be sort of constantly referred to for the next 15 years every time Weston McKennie plays for the U.S.?
Well, and Juventus, I think. I think
that's
or
true.
He's probably going to get kicked off of Juventus for, doing something stupid. So wherever he ends up. NYCFC.
I do kind of want to know how the team found out, though.
Yeah.
Like, did someone narc? Was his hotel room like bumping up against Michael Kammerman's, and what was the order of operations?
Oh my God. What are the chances that it was only him violating protocol over the past week?
Well, according to Weston McKennie's dad, who everyone's favorite Twitter feed is, it was not just him. So I think that's a pretty good source. That's one source. We just need a second source.
We should have had his dad actually on the podcast. That was a very big oversight on my part.
69.
We also could have educated him on sort of how COVID is typically transmitted from person to person.
All right, can we go back to the Berhalter running around Nashville thing? It's definitely not a COVID protocol, but it's so strange.
I run through LA all the time with a big sign sticking out of my back saying, I am the coach of the U.S. national team.
Yeah, he's also wearing U.S. national team gear. Like, I see Steve Nash relatively frequently in my neighborhood, and he's wearing Brooklyn Nets gear, and it always cracks me up. It's like, dude, it's August. Like, you're not in a Nets capacity. You're walking your children to school. Like, you have other clothes. I know Greg Berhalter has other clothes. He's running around Nashville like 3 hours before a game, whatever, 5 hours before a game. Like, that's a weird thing to do.
Well, you're kind of an expert on running through cities. I feel like you've ran through many. I feel like running through like downtown honky tonk like station in Nashville is not really like, that's not achieving most of the reasons I would go for a run outside and not on a treadmill, which presumably they did have at whatever hotel the US was staying at. Plus it was also kind of weird to me that he was holding his phone.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't understand that. Any comments, Andrew, on the...
Should we like put together a little Venmo and him some money to get some running shorts that have like a phone pocket? Not US branded. I like the Brooks Sherpa shorts. This is not a paid endorsement. Just I think they're a good pair of running shorts.
I mean, I'm wondering if he had pocketed shorts, but they didn't have the U.S. national team logo on them. So he was worried that people wouldn't know he was the coach. So he had to either hold his phone or be anonymous. And obviously being anonymous is not an option.
I mean, I like it. I think it's some good personality, good form. Looked like he was running, relatively fast and what was a pretty hot day.
That was
good
not
lateral
good
quickness.
Form. Absolutely not good form.
All right. Well, we're trying to stay positive here. So
fair. I feel like
Jurgen flew a helicopter to training. Greg just ran. Come on, step up your game, dude.
That's true. How do you think Bob Bradley got to training?
In a very reliable car.
Just walked like sort of every other person might.
Owled his way down the street.
Yeah, people just, the sidewalk parted when he walked by. The fact that we're talking about all this stupid shit, I think probably there is a way for me to tie it into the fact that the U.S. played 3 games. So 3 games down, 11 to go, which I feel like some people may have forgotten as I saw this Honduras game being referred to as a must win, which is pretty weird when there's 11 games remaining in the competition to qualify for the World Cup. But so the U.S. ultimately finishes with 2 draws and a win. They're on 5 points with a +5 goal differential. So that puts them tied for second with Canada. Literally tied because they have the exact same number of goals scored and goals against, and they drew each other. I think the tiebreaker for that would probably be like a coin toss, or they would actually have to play an extra fake game to determine who came in second or third, or I guess they would only do it if it was third and fourth. But yeah,
it feels like there's an arbitrary tiebreaker there. Like, everyone faces off at some bridge or something.
Do you guys want the actual truth, or should we just continue doing these hypotheticals?
Well, I thought it was goals scored head to head.
So first of all,
and they're tied on all of those.
Goal differential is +3, not +5. They've scored 5 goals. They both scored 5 goals.
That's what I said. We were going to edit that after the fact, and now we can't because you pointed it out.
It's so head-to-head away goals is the tiebreaker. So Canada is technically in second place because they have 1, and the U.S. has 0 because they haven't played away.
Did you see that both Canada and U.S. Federation tweeted out an image of the standings, and Canada's had Canada in second, and the U.S. has had the U.S. in second?
That's good. I like that a lot.
Yeah, it's extremely petty. Yeah, I just I mean, what's your what's your main kind of feeling after these games? Has it, I guess maybe has, in a way, these are like the first 3 games we've gotten to see with, other than the Nations League, if you want to count that. And I don't even know if the Nations League was technically considered a full roster. Obviously, the Gold Cup wasn't. Basically, the first competitive games we got to see with at least some collection of all of these talented young players the U.S. has. So do you feel any differently about the state of the team, where the team's headed, the job? People call him GGG, I've noticed on Twitter, which thought that there was a boxer called Triple G, so I think he has that before Greg. But has your kind of feeling about the team changed at all, basically, after 3 games? And if not, why not?
I think if you told me at the beginning of these 3 games that they were going to be in second place and have 5 points, I would have said it's not a great result, but it's okay. I think also because so many of the other teams dropped so many points. You know, it's like Mexico has 7, Canada has 5, Panama has 5, Costa Rica has 2, Honduras has 2, El Salvador has 2, Jamaica has 1.
Top 5 all have at least 4, then the bottom. The top 4 all have at least 5, bottom 4 all have no more than 2.
Yeah, and there are a lot of ties, which I think is really good if you're trying to, you know, because it's fewer points, obviously. It's 2 versus 3. Yeah. You know, I think we still haven't seen Adams, McKennie, Pulisic, and Reyna play on the field together. So that just seems like maybe it's never going to happen. I don't know.
Wow.
I feel like there were like some good spots. I mean, it does seem like Pepe scored that goal last night, which was great. Everyone sort of seems to think that he's now the next whatever. I'm a little not entirely sold, but you know, I think if they found a striker, that would be great. I think there were also a lot of guys who didn't show up. Like, seemed like Sargent is sort of lost. John Brooks looked mostly terrible.
That was pretty weird.
I think the El Salvador game, I think that team is better and that situation is tougher, and also because it was the first game of World Cup qualifying, like that's a little bit of a pass. The Canada game, like, I don't know, I feel like you should win that game. And then the Honduras game, like the first 45 minutes of Honduras was horrible, and then the second 45 was better. It's still like, you know, they were pretty close on expected goals. It was not a 4-1 game. It also, like, I think Berhalter made good substitutions in the Honduras game after not doing anything in Canada. But, like, why do you have to make those substitutions? I mean, it was pretty clear that lineup he put out there to start the game was not particularly good. And I think for a guy who, you know, you're sort of worried about his tactical acumen, I think, I don't think he answered a whole lot of questions in the positive in these 3 games.
Yeah. What about you, Helms?
Yeah. I think it's just, you know, we're 3 years into this, and it feels like we haven't made one step forward in terms of, and obviously, you know, we can talk about injuries and COVID and all of the logistical reasons why, you know, we've never seen Pulisic, Reyna, McKennie, Adams on the field together. But I still don't know what the system is that we're playing. I still don't know how we want to try to score goals and create chances. You know, it started back in when Gephart got hired. It was like, we're going to be a possession-oriented team. It was all kind of like, we're going to be like Pep Guardiola and Manchester City. And then, you know, that didn't work. And now we're just kind of, it feels like we're just throwing darts at a board. And like, I think I said this to you guys the other day, but, you know, that lineup he trotted out against Honduras, right? It's like you know, not a must-win game, but you want to win that game. And you're like, okay, let's put our best defensive midfielder at right back. Let's start, you know, Pepe, who redeemed it, who did a good game, but let's start someone who's never started a World Cup qualifier at forward. Let's, you know,
Sargent was kind of on the wing.
Yeah, put Sargent on the wing, and it's like, I don't know. I guess my hope would be that at this point, you know, we had the Nations League, we had Gold Cup, we had all of this stuff kind of building up to World Cup qualifying, so we could really hit the ground running with this run of 3 games and like have an identity and a sense of how we want to play and how we want to create. And I still don't think we really have that figured out. And maybe that's fine, and that's been the plan, and like they knew that coming in. But I think my big worry is like, Greg is so focused on having like the optimal solution and finding the perfect way to play, that he's just avoiding. I think you tweeted it, Ryan. It's like, just play soccer and score goals. Like, this is not hard. Put players in positions they know how to play. It's not a club team. You don't have weeks to drill. Like, McKennie, Adams plays 6. Put him at the 6. Let's put players where they can be successful and where they know what to do. Like, why aren't we a team that just like presses and tries to create chances in those like broken moments? Like, that's the player pool we have. That's what we should be doing. But we keep trying all this other shit instead of just doing something that we think that can work.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest, if you take each game, I think they looked pretty bad in a lot of ways against El Salvador, but also probably should have easily won the game and didn't really give up any chances. Then Canada, they played pretty well up until they scored, and then Alphonso Davies and Buchanan both just kind of tortured the U.S. for the rest of the half, and Berhalter made no subs, and the team didn't really get a foothold in the game. And then this game, like Noah said, the first half is one of the worst halves you'll probably see the U.S. ever play in qualifying, especially in a game not against Mexico. And then Berhalter made a bunch of changes at halftime, but he made a bunch of changes at halftime to a lineup where most people that looked at the lineup were either I have no idea who will be playing where on the field, or I have no idea who 7 of the people in this lineup are. Depending on your level of familiarity with the team. And then in the second half, it was a good comeback and they looked better, but ultimately Anthony Robinson bent a ball in with his right foot at the far post, one touch, and then did a backflip. Neither of those things are probably going to happen too often again for the US. I mean, I hope he keeps doing backflips, obviously, but he should do a backflip every time anyone scores, not just himself. I think if he actually cares about the team, or if he has an assist. Then Pepe scores a really nice header, but it's a really pretty great header. And then they kind of get the 2 other sort of tap-ins through broken play when Honduras is chasing the game. So basically, what I think you're left with is they outplayed El Salvador, and then they basically had 50-50 games against Canada and Honduras, and that doesn't seem like progress from previous cycles. If anything, it seems potentially going a little backward, even with the fact that those 4 guys and even Sergiño Dest, I think you could throw in there, have never played on the field together for the U.S. national team. But the benefit of having 5 of those guys is 3 of them can be injured, and you still have basically 2 more talented and more integral pieces to top European teams than the U.S. has ever had. But beyond just the results, like you said, Helms, it's each game, it just felt like a different team. The first game, it did seem like they at least tried to play the pressing game in sort of transitional moments, but suffered because they literally had no one on the field who could pass the ball. And they didn't have Dest, who's and John Brooks, who are both sort of pretty capable guys with the ball at their feet in the back line. And then against Canada, they had, an absurd amount of possession, didn't create a ton of chances, but also gave up an incredible number of high quality chances given the fact that they had 70% possession. And then this last game, I have no idea I don't understand what the game plan was. And I don't know why you need to play a 3-5-2 against Honduras. I think ultimately, I think we all probably agree that this is the most talented group of players the U.S. has ever had. You just need to put the players out there in a position to let the talent overwhelm their opponent, right? That's kind of how I feel. I mean, I'm kind of struck by the fact that, I don't know, what were the Pulisic stats from qualifying last time were 13 goals and assists in his first 13 games when he was 17. And I don't think he's played bad, but it's kind of striking to me that basically he was way more involved and effective and dangerous under Klinsmann and Bruce Arena, who everyone kind of agrees didn't know what they were doing. And here it's he's involved, but he's involved in terms of like having to get the ball from Matt Turner and then trying to dribble up the entire field by himself and ultimately get injured by the end of the game.
I feel like some of that's on him though too. Like he doesn't really seem interested in passing the ball. Like he plays in the team concept for like 10 minutes and is like, this isn't working, I'm getting kicked. And then he like loses his mind and just tries to dribble by everyone else. And I think part of that is probably a function of not having a coherent team structure. But he just like, he's got a little ball hog in him when he gets in the U.S. and he's like, I'm just better than the rest of these guys. It's a better chance for me to dribble through three guys than to pass the ball, because if I pass the ball, it's never coming back. And I think there is a little bit of that. That's true, but it also feels like he just kind of melts down in ways that are super unproductive.
But I also think so much this was kind of a question that was going around, is like, is the bad performance a result of a bad system or players just not executing? And I don't know, I feel like so much of the execution problems, I don't know why you wouldn't also put that on Berhalter and on, you know, you had the Gold Cup, you could have brought all these guys to the Gold Cup, you know, there were a chance to have this whole kind of first team be together and have these moments where things aren't working and try stuff out. And obviously, like I get the desire to give everyone rest and whatnot and give them the summer off, but I don't know. It seems as if there have been so many moments in the past where so many of these kinks could have been worked out, and you know, the reason Pulisic feels this way is because he does. Yeah, you know, he constantly has been put in this position where he has to try to do it all himself. But like, we have to beat that mentality out of him somewhat, right? And put him in a position where he can like trust the people around him and trust the system. But it seems like over 3 years, there's been no progress made in like giving Pulisic a system that he feels like he can trust in, right? Because that's not how he plays with Chelsea.
No. Yeah, I mean, I also think that like you can get to a point where like you can blame, and obviously like players make mistakes, and sometimes the nature of soccer is like one player makes one mistake, plays well the rest of the game, but that one mistake leads to a goal. But like, I don't know, like if you think Pulisic is playing in a sort of suboptimal way, but then you also see like John Brooks just looks completely lost for some reason. And then also like Sergiño Dest is getting just torn apart by Alphonso Davies. And then DeAndre Yedlin is also getting torn apart by Alphonso Davies. And James Sands like looks like he's never played soccer before, because he's now suddenly playing as like a double pivot for a team where he played as a center back in the Gold Cup and had never played in this position before. So I don't know. I feel like you see enough sort of little execution mistakes from like players that are theoretically very good outside of the US national team structure that there's so many of them. I feel like that it's hard for me to divorce that from like the fact that they're either being asked to do the wrong thing, they're not being protected in the right way by the system, or like they're being overwhelmed by like playing a completely different style with every game, basically.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I think like to that point, it feels like the variance for how good individual players are going to play each game is very high and very unpredictable. And it's like you get a game like the Nations League Cup, I think, where George Bello like played out on the left and was great. And then it's like you get a game like last night where he's out on the left doing pretty much the same thing and is very bad. And yeah. I don't think George Bello is either one of the, like, I don't think either one of those performances is indicative of where he is. He's somewhere in the middle, but it does feel like with this team and like with under Berhalter that like every game there's like a couple guys who just are terrible. And in strange ways, and like I don't think Sands is a great example because to your point, like he was playing out of position, but it also is like the dude fell down like 15 times last night. Like someone get him some cleats, you know.
He couldn't trap a ball. Like
it was amazing, and it's like yeah, and it's like they just like I don't know. It just feels like guys, their minds go blank and they like break down and can't play soccer anymore. And I don't know, maybe I just don't remember that from past teams, but it does feel like to me that sometimes these guys go out there and it's just like every game it's like there's a couple guys who are just not doing not even close to their potential, and not even like the best they can play, but even like whatever their baseline is, they're like way under the baseline for that 90 minutes. And it really screws it up because soccer is such a game of like you're, the least best player on the field, like that's the weak point. And and especially when Alphonso Davies is on the other wing and is like tearing that guy who's having a shocker up,
Yeah. I mean, do you guys make, like, what do you make of the whole on the road in CONCACAF like thing? Yes, the U.S. did just win 4-1 in Honduras, but I think we're all of the mind that it was actually like a pretty even game on the whole. So like looking at it like some sort of triumph in a way the team has never triumphed before, I think it's more just a random outcome than anything. Like, is there, I don't know, I look at it and it's like, I honestly think like the hardest game for them to play was the Canada game because Canada played super defensively and there just wasn't that much space. And then Canada has like, I don't know, maybe the best non-American CONCACAF player of all time, like in Alphonso Davies already, and is like the ideal player to have if you're going to just defend really deep and then just try to counter. But the other two games, I don't know, like I understand that the field's fucked up and like, it's probably intimidating playing in front of a ton of like crazy fans, especially after like a year of not doing it. But like, I don't know, should we, like you look at the players on El Salvador and Honduras and you compare them to the US and obviously they're not close, unless like El Salvador and Honduras are just countries that the rest of the world isn't scouting and those players aren't getting picked up by bigger teams for no reason. Like the talent isn't close, but should we give more credence to like, it's actually like, though Honduras is like the 78th ranked team in the ELO ratings or 60th, like it's actually pretty hard to go to Honduras? Or was that the case in the past because the team like wasn't that good?
It can be both, right? I mean, these away qualifiers are obviously difficult places to play and environments to play, especially if you've never done it. But at the same time, I know I keep coming back to this, but you had 3 years to get ready for this game, So it doesn't really feel like that should be much of an excuse given the talent disparities on display with the game. And yeah, maybe Miles Robinson nails that header against El Salvador, and it's a 1-0 win, and we're sitting on 7 points instead of 5 and talking about things really differently. But I even think then, just the lack of like, I still haven't in this time period like gone into a U.S. game and been like, that was a convincing and thorough display of like, you took the game to the opponent from the first whistle and it was like a clear win.
Yeah.
I can't remember the last time I like saw a performance like that from a U.S. team.
I can't either. Definitely would be pre-pandemic if it happened. I mean, I remember, was it like Jamaica or Trinidad in the Gold Cup, Noah, like 2019? They won like 5 or 6-0. Do you remember that game? In like the quarters or something? It was either Jamaica or Trinidad. But again, it was
sounds right.
Either Jamaica or Trinidad in the U.S.
And it's at home, too.
Yeah.
I mean, I had thought about this because I think the idea that soccer on the road is very difficult generally is kind of bullshit. Like, I don't understand why the away teams don't win more, just like across the board. I think we've all been to those away qualifiers, and they are intimidating in a way that I think playing soccer in Europe is not. And not to say that it's not intimidating to go into Stoke on a rainy Wednesday night or whatever and like play in front of 35,000 people. But there are little things. It's very different, I think, and I think athletes thrive on consistency. And you've been to Stoke before. Like, if you haven't played in El Salvador, like it's a different experience, and I get that. I also think it's probably, I think Ryan, I think you talk about this a lot in the newsletter, but soccer is such a game of luck, and I do think that there is like you can have a lot of little confounding things. Like, I think the refs are, you probably don't get the calls in the same way that you do when you're at home, especially in CONCACAF, especially in World Cup qualifier. I think so. I think the refs can maybe be a little intimidated. I think maybe, because the home team knows the field a little better, or has played there more, there's a little bit more experience, there's a little bit more comfortableness. I think probably your luck is better as a home team in a way that is, statistically significant over time when you add these other things. I think travel, comfort. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of little things about playing away in CONCACAF and also soccer generally, I think, that do add up. And because goals are so important, it's like if you add up all of those little things, and there's so few moments in soccer games that actually matter, and if you add up all of those little things, and it increases the chances that one of those big things happens 5 or 10%, like that is going to make a big difference. At the same time, like, you still should beat El Salvador. I mean, like, I don't know. They're
you shouldn't be giving up 18 shots to Honduras. Like, that's
right. Exactly. And also, like, Honduras, like, that stadium has a giant track around it. It's not that stadium is not that intimidating. El Salvador is intimidating. Like, Costa Rica is intimidating. I think
it's intimidating if you're in the stands, not on the field.
yeah, exactly. Like, Azteca, I think, is actually not intimidating anymore because they put a bunch of corporate boxes in. But, like, the 2009 game, like, that was really intimidating to be on that field, to be in those stands. So I think there is some of that, but it's like, I don't know. I do think it becomes a pretty convenient crutch when you don't perform, and I think it's kind of ridiculous that the U.S. is like, I think this tie on the road. I mean, I don't know. To like the players' credits, they all said they were going to win all the games. Like, I don't know what else you would say, but it does feel like there's this kind of like, we just go out and we draw on the road. I'm like, well, really? That's sort of the aspiration here? I don't know.
Yeah, like it. You're right. I think you're exactly right. Like, ultimately, like, it's maybe the home field advantage for El Salvador and Honduras is bigger than, let's say, Northern Ireland versus Germany or something like that. If you want to take European teams, maybe it's bigger, but also, like, it's not like it turns Honduras and El Salvador into, like, teams that are as good as the U.S. Like, there's still a large gap even with all of those marginal factors that you were talking about. And then I guess the other thing is, like, then the game they did have at home, they didn't really play that well.
Also, like, it's hard to play in Argentina, and then Argentina is also fucking good at soccer. So it's like, if the U.S. is trying to qualify anywhere else, like, it wouldn't happen.
Yeah.
And so there's that too, of like, I feel like on some level we're kind of not making up these difficulties, but like mapping difficulty onto a region because the teams aren't that good. And I don't think that's
we're
particularly productive.
Searching for answers for why the team isn't better rather than like just being like, the team isn't as good as it should be, which is probably the Occam's razor of this whole thing.
I think no one is like as delusional about how good the U.S. men's national team is. Like, more than one, like, U.S. fans.
Yeah.
And two, I think U.S. soccer itself, like, has this, like, and it's like that lineup that Berhalter played is like, there's a ton of hubris associated with, like, I can throw this, like, random formation out in a game that matters, and, like, it's going to work because I ran the numbers in my computer machine, and it said that Team Sans should play midfield, right? Like there is this. I mean, it's like been something. Ryan, I wrote about in like the Ringer piece about the Klinsmann era. It's like there is this like constant, pervasive sense among U.S. soccerers, like, we know better than you. Who are you to be criticizing us? We've been through it, like, and that a big that is like, oh, you just don't understand how hard it is to play in Central America, right?
Yeah.
It's like it's funny how it like it hits both sides, where there's this like overriding faith of like how great this team is, and we have all these amazing young players. They're trying to have all of the same. They're trying to have their cake and eat it too, when like the reality is actually in the middle. Like, we're not that great. We need to figure out a way. But we do have a core of good young players, and like, let's figure out how to get the best out of them. And like, maybe then we can be like one of the best teams in this region, and have a chance to maybe do some good stuff if they continue to develop and mature, and you can actually maybe become a really good soccer team down the line. But like, it's baby steps. We're both trying to, it's funny how like the win last night, like losing wouldn't have been, it's like losing wouldn't have been catastrophic because you just don't understand how terrible it is to play there. But guess what? It's a monumental win, right?
Yeah.
We went in there and got a 4-1 win. It's like they're just trying to have it both ways with all of these narratives.
You can't like constantly be tweeting about like X player contributing to a goal for X team in the Champions League, and then also like a month later have a tweet that's like solid point on the road. Every point on the road against El Salvador is a good point. Like you can't like have an Instagram post about Christian Pulisic holding the Champions League trophy, and then Zach Steffen, also being on the roster of a Champions League team, and then also be like solid away point to start qualifying against fucking El Salvador. Those things are probably not.
You've spent an entire cycle raising U.S. men's fans' expectations, only to be like, but it's hot in Central America.
Yeah.
It's like, have we talked about how patronizing it is to like the people of South America, that they're so otherized that this is like this unholy environment that no American team or players from Europe could go to? It's like pretty fucked up.
Also,
they're people too.
One thing I enjoyed about the game last night is like, there's this whole like very patronizing thing of talking about CONCACAF, just sort of essentially white journalists talking about how uncultured the sort of Central American teams play. And last night the U.S. had more fouls than Honduras, which I thought was really funny. So, maybe the U.S. just needs to become like the El Salvador or the Honduras of CONCACAF. Do you guys think, like, how much pressure do you think Berhalter would have been under if they lost the game against Honduras? Do you even think his job would have even been close to being in jeopardy?
I do, yeah. Because I think if you're going to make a change, you'd have to make a change quickly. I guess, I don't know
when did Klinsmann got fired, how far in?
After 6, right? It was 6 or 10?
It was after the Costa Rica game.
Yeah, I forget if that was 3 or 6. But either way, it was because of fewer games, it was still a bigger chunk of the games.
I think what would have happened, because they have games in like 4 weeks, and I think they're like some of the easier games. I think it's El Salvador at home. I think they have 2 home games. One of them is El Salvador, maybe Jamaica as well. I think he probably could have talked his way into staying for those games and been like, okay, we'll get 9 points and we'll get this thing back on track. But it wouldn't have totally surprised me if he lost his job, if they lost last night.
I mean, given that, it's just like, say that again.
I think I would have been surprised if he was fired. I think there would have been, if you drop one more game in qualifying, you're getting the yoke, and they probably would have already been starting to line up successors. But yeah, I think given the amount of like they've invested so much money in this like Greg Berhalter program, it's 3 years in, and like everyone's go forward. I do think it's funny, their campaign, like the forward campaign, obviously just invites the question, forward from what, and like every story just references it's like, we're moving on. Like, why? You like your own marketing campaign invites the question. But yeah, I think they probably would have already started sounding out candidates and whatnot. But I would be surprised if they've moved on from Greg just after all of this.
I bet they would have waited until October and then fired him and then hired Bradley, who's out of contract with LAFC at the end of this year. That would have been my bet. Or Ryan, as we talked about yesterday, Jesse Marsh after he gets fired on Saturday for losing to Byron, starting out, whatever they are, 0-4.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the either one of those would have honestly probably been. I mean, they're frankly both way more accomplished managers than Greg Berhalter. Like that's even if you like Greg Berhalter and actually think he's a good coach, Bradley and Jesse Marsh are both like they've just coached much better teams than Greg Berhalter ever has. But I mean, given that you guys are saying that, like it makes it even crazier that like this kind of in some sense for Greg Berhalter borderline make or break game against Honduras. He's just like, we're going to play a totally new formation. Guy who can't trap a ball is going to be one of our center midfielders. Our best center midfielder, who like was our standout player from the first two games, will now be playing right wing back. Our striker who can't score will actually play on the wing. Here's George Bello. Like, even though Anthony Robinson like was maybe the best player against Canada, like you're not allowed to play this game. Like it adds an even another kind of level of like, I guess it's hard. I don't know if arrogance is the right word, but it's something maybe potentially a little close to that.
I do wonder if there were any like minute restrictions or sort of tacit agreements with club teams. I think that's the one piece that we don't know about, is like what coach said, okay, we'll release the player. I mean, I guess they have to release the players, but like, yes, we really want Anthony Robinson to only play 90 minutes or whatever. And then it's like, oh, we got to win this game, in the second half, things change. Like I do feel like there may be some of that, but at the same time, even if 8 of those guys, even if half the team couldn't play or something like that, you still don't have to play this ridiculous formation. Like there are ways around that. But
at the same time, I'm pretty sure before the Canada game, Berhalter said that Pulisic had like 70 minutes, basically, and then he'd played the whole game. So, and then sort of
that too.
Ran him into the ground in the next game. I mean, how much do you? I mean, it will be interesting. Like, it's funny. Like, if you look at sort of the on-off stats, which are pretty much useless for soccer, but they're funny to look at. Like Christian Roldan has the best sort of on-off margin through qualifying for the U.S. basically because he got subbed on for Pulisic, and then I think the U.S. scored 4 goals right after he came on, basically, or maybe 3. But like, I said this in like the chat I have for my newsletter. Roldan coming on for Pulisic is like, maybe the largest degree discrepancy in quality in a sub in the history of American soccer, probably. Honestly, one of the largest probably in the history of CONCACAF. So like, like a lot of the Berhalter, I think, deserves a lot of blame. But, getting Pulisic, McKinney, Dest, Reyna, and Adams on the field at the same time, like, does seem like it would make the U.S. a significantly better team, which I guess seems like the last kind of out in a way for like maybe explaining away what's happening.
But like also not if James Sands is starting in central midfield too, right? Like all of these things are true, but then he also has to put each of those players in a position where they have a chance to
like you can't have Serginho Dest one-on-one with Alphonso Davies. That's not that would not like. That's not a situation he should be put in, but that doesn't mean you don't play Serginho Dest. It means you play him and find a way to sort of help against that.
It's like, I feel like Greg puts system before players, and he needs to put, these are your best players. Now let's put a system that enables that to work, rather than just trying to like round hole square peg these people because you think it's the ideal way to face off against this team or whatever.
It's also just like, maybe don't, like, I get it if you're playing, I don't know, Denmark in the World Cup or something, and you want to have a specific game plan for them. And then obviously, in a way, like having a game plan against, again, Germany, England, etc. makes sense. But like, you're just I don't think you need like a super, bespoke game plan to beat El Salvador or Honduras. Like, I'm sorry. That's like, like you're saying, the system versus player thing. I think you could even argue that system would be more important than player. Like generation ago in the US, where like maybe the difference between the third best player and the 40th best player wasn't actually that big. But now like it actually is very large, the gap between the handful of best players, and not to keep ragging on James Sands, but the James Sands of the pool. So like the way the player pool is set up is like you want to be getting the best out of these 5 players rather than like having a system where maybe these 5 players don't all fit. And I do think that like there are like, no national team is perfect, and like it's pretty big deal that the US, I mean, obviously they've solved this issue with Pepe, who will be starting for Manchester City in the Champions League in February. But like it's hard to have a good international team when you don't have a striker that can score, which is pretty much what Josh Sargent is at this point in his career. Sibachu, or Pifok, I should call him. He seems fine, I guess, maybe fine. Daryl DK, that, I think people learned that they got a little bit ahead of themselves with the Daryl DK hype after seeing him play in the Gold Cup. Like that's tough, having a team without a striker. And then it's also tough having no one that can really pass the ball that well other than your center back, John Anthony Brooks, who's also like had multiple mental breakdowns, it seems like, over this cycle. But like those are issues, but like the US still has so much more talent that I feel like it's not, I don't think it's as big of a problem as, it could be made out to be, if that makes any sense.
Okay, but to that point, like I would argue that Christian Roldan is good enough to win that game, and also he cares and isn't soft. And I think like you see like no, like that team, there are a lot of guys on the team that are soft, and I think that's a problem. And I think they fall apart when they get kicked, and you see them like give up mentally, and I'm like that's just what happens. And I don't think that like there are some guys like Roldan, who is definitely not the most skilled guy, but like he comes on in that game and like works his ass off, and like I don't know, I think in an away qualifier where like, not to go all head coach, like football coach, but like heart and desire, I think matters a little bit more than skill in some ways. And I think you see some guys who are trying to like skill their way to victory, and they're not good enough to do that. The team is not good enough to do that. So I think, they have plenty of talent to be, they're better. Christian Roldan is better than most of the players on Honduras anyway. So like he comes in and he's a downgrade in talent, but in that game, I think there's an argument that he's an upgrade in the ways that are really going to matter for the result.
I mean, I do think that there are, part of what we're saying in a way is like, to get the best out of your best players, some of the things you probably have to do are like you're not picking the 11 players with the best FIFA ratings, basically. You know what I mean? But you still want to have the 5 guys that have the best FIFA ratings. You know what I mean? Essentially. So like, I think there is a role, like Christian Roldan probably maybe has a role in the team in some way, like you're describing. I think there's a role for a player that is going to cover the space for Serginho Dest when he gets forward and maybe can't really do anything else and can pass the ball sideways. There's, other Sebastian Lletget also seems to probably do a thing that a lot of players on this team can't do. Like he's always making little passes in the final third that you don't see other players on the team making. So there are, there's a balance of like getting the best out of these best guys because they're that good, and then also playing sort of lesser, less flashy, less heralded players to maybe make sure you're getting the best out of these 5 players. I think. I mean, that's ultimately we're just describing things that like a coach of any national team has to do, Yeah. And a lot of national teams are lucky enough to not be in CONCACAF, I would say, or not lucky, or are not lucky enough to be in CONCACAF. Right. Is what I'm saying. I think, like, yes, El Salvador's hard, but like you said, the U.S. would be harder for the U.S. to qualify for the World Cup if they were in CONMEBOL or UEFA. Like it would be a lot harder. So,
I guess that my question is like, do we feel like Berhalter's kind of like, all right, you got these 3 games under your belt, you've realized a few things, and now we're going to kind of settle on a team that we think works, and hopefully players will stay healthy and like we'll start to see some progression? Or do you think it's going to continue to be this kind of just like roller coaster of results and lineups and shifting fortunes?
I mean, the positive case is right that like, a lot of these top players sort of came into their own over the past 18 months where there haven't been that many games for the US. So like in a way, these are some of the first games he's had to like see what happens when you have Pulisic and Adams and Brendan Aronson and Josh Sargent and Sergiño Dest all on the field together. So
you said top players and you said Josh Sargent.
He plays in the Premier League,
He's on a Premier League team.
No, as I started saying that, I realized that like none of the top players actually all got to play together. But like, Conrad De La Fuente is playing for Marseille and he started a game. Brendan Aronson's played a lot. McKennie and Adams were out there together. So he's at least getting some examples of like competitive games. How do these players fit together? I think that would be the positive case. And maybe he's now understanding like how they fit and the things that he has to cover up for them. But that's projection heavy. Because like you said, there's no evidence that they've been building toward as anything really specific in my mind over the past.
Yeah.
Like the main thing that's happened with the US is like they have good young players that play for teams in the Champions League, not that the team itself has grown in any impressive way.
Can I read a quote from Tyler Adams?
Yes.
This is what he said after the game. You saw how much more comfortable we were in the 4-3-3, Adams said after the game. We had more numbers in the midfield. I think in the first half it was very difficult for James and Kellen in the transition moments because if you miss the first tackle, it's 3 against 1. So that was difficult. But in the second half, when we had more numbers in midfield, I think that helped us. So Greg Berhalter, in the closest thing to a must-win game of his career, basically started a formation where no one felt comfortable at all.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a great proof point for his will he ever stop tinkering? Will he figure out what he knows and what he doesn't know and just stick with what works?
Well, especially that quote is like, as Tyler Adams, the best player to deal with that situation he's describing is standing elsewhere on the field, constantly watching people run by James Sands. Like that's another. But the other thing is like Pulisic, I feel like Pulisic had similar comments after the Canada game, didn't he? He was kind of like, yeah, the system doesn't work. I didn't say that exactly, but he was like, we're not creating any space.
We don't know how to break down a team that's basically bunkered. Right?
Exactly,
yeah.
Which is, it's kind of not common for players to sort of make overt criticisms of the team's tactics after games. And you have, Adams and Pulisic play for and have played for 2 of the best managers in Europe and 2 of the most sort of like tactically astute managers in Tuchel and Nagelsmann. So like if they're going to know how tactics work, honestly, probably are going to have a better sense of it than Berhalter, like, because they're doing it on a weekly basis.
And also, like, how was it a surprise for the U.S. that we were going to be facing a team that was pretty bunkered and playing deep and making us take the game to them? Like, you had to have known for the last 3 years. Like, that's what happens in so many of these CONCACAF games.
Yeah.
They just are like, break us down, go ahead. Anyway, I'm making all the same points again, but it just kind of constantly comes back to you've literally had 3 years to prepare for this game, and then you were just like, at least, credit to Jurgen. He just was like, fuck it, I'm going to play mixed disc route it right back and see what happens.
Yeah.
Like, Greg's labored over these spreadsheets for nights and came up with a totally terrible game plan.
You don't think Berhalter should start feuding? Like, should Berhalter, I mean, I guess he has started feuding with one of his players, at least according to that player's dad. But yeah, like maybe Berhalter should be like Pulisic shouldn't play for Chelsea. Like he should come to MLS. Like he should do the reverse Klinsmann. Like he should challenge himself by trying to raise up the quality of MLS rather than like being a bench warmer for Chelsea.
This was one of the criticisms you saw online where people were like, I'm taking your joke seriously, but it was that, we have all these players who play for good European teams, but no one's like the guy, right? When Chelsea needs a goal, it's not like, let's give the ball to Christian.
Yeah.
So do you think there's anything to that critique that like none of our good young players are like the go-to person on their club team and don't have that responsibility like Landon or Clint did back in the day?
I don't know. Like, I don't watch Pulisic and think this guy's like scared to like want responsibility. If anything, like Noah said, it's like he maybe wants too much responsibility. And obviously Gio Reyna thinks he's the best soccer player in the world. Like without a doubt, like he definitely thinks he's better than Messi. So I mean, I look at that more as like, I don't really buy it as a critique in terms of like the mentality of the players. It's maybe a critique in terms of like, yeah, they don't have like a actual superstar on the team, but like, have they ever?
Yeah.
But neither was Clint Dempsey or Landon Donovan in like relative terms.
But it's right? Like we said, Pulisic like had like a ton of goals and assists when he was like 18, so it's not, people weren't saying that about him when he was worse at soccer, I
also don't think there's a ton of 22 and 23-year-olds in the world who have that position on their club team, right? Like, especially these top teams. I think that may be a problem in 3 or 4 years if that's still happening, but that would mostly just mean that these guys haven't progressed, I think, in the way that we hope they will. I do think that there is a leadership issue on this team potentially, and I think that's been around for a while. Actually, and I don't want to get into the what did Weston do and what did not Weston not do, because I don't think that's important, but I do think that it's not a great sign for the coach that you brought in to fix the team culture, who actually think it did a very good job of that for 2 years or 3 years, however long he's been the coach, to now have one of your team leaders just sort of ignore all the rules and not feel, entirely compelled to stay within the bubble and whatnot. That feels like not a great sign also, especially if, I think the critique of Berhalter was that he was maybe not the most tactically flexible manager or great at that side of it, but he was very good at building a culture, and I think that was, he did that in Columbus very well. I think he did it in Sweden well as well. Now you sort of have the guy who's supposed to be building the culture, and it's like, well, maybe the culture is not quite as good as we all thought it was, and I don't know if that's true or not. I think that remains to be seen. But I do think that's kind of a concern.
Yeah, I mean, it's not. If you're going to hang your hat on culture, and I feel like that is like a thing that has been quoted for the past 3 years.
Yeah.
To then, have what happened happen is sort of kind of puts a pretty big pin into the bubble the balloon you were sort of blowing up. But I mean, I guess,
and not to get into the specifics, but it also happened twice. There were 2 violations.
Yeah.
Like, presumably there was a violation, a warning, and then a subsequent violation, which very much speaks to how much no one really believed. I mean, maybe it's good that he laid down the hammer and sent him home, and sending a message that the rules matter and there are consequences to them.
Yeah.
But it also maybe sends also a signal that there have been violations in the past that haven't been met with consequences, right? And that if I'm Weston McKennie, I do think because I'm young and talented, I can get away with stuff with this team. You do wonder if there are a few things that Greg, in the name of team unity, let slide, where he should have actually cracked down.
Yeah, I mean, I guess this is also
broken windows of coaching.
Oh my god. Yeah, I mean, it's I guess, the lineup they put out for the Honduras game was the youngest lineup they've ever played in World Cup qualifying. There's all kinds of, U.S. Soccer's tweeting about some new record that they've set, third youngest player to play against Canada, stuff like that, that they're setting all the time. So, I think that's probably also part of it too. You don't, it's just a different generation of players, and you don't really. This team just doesn't have like. I think it's great to have all these young players playing together and getting better at the same time, but they really, I don't know, it's like Tim Ream, and then that's it in terms of like over the age of like 27, it feels like on the team. So,
well, I think we forget how young they are too, because it's like as soon as anyone who's over the age of 14 shows an ounce of talent, like U.S. soccer loses its mind. U.S. soccer, like collective fan base, loses its mind and starts talking about these players. So it's like we've been talking about these guys for half a decade, and they're still 22, and they feel a lot older than they are.
Yeah. I mean McKinney. It's still crazy to think like McKinney's 23 and he's the oldest of the like sort of 5 stars. Adams is 22, Pulisic's 22, Dest is 20, and the best soccer player in the world is 18. So I think if Reyna was still like, if Reyna didn't get hurt before the Canada game, McKinney doesn't violate team protocol. Reyna keeps him in line.
Come on, man. Just stay in, play FIFA with me.
Yeah, let me kill you in FIFA, bro. I beat Marco Reus all the time. All right. Well, so like I guess we're all kind of saying very not impressed by what's happened so far. And I guess what we would want to see in the next games is like just them trying to play the same way and roughly have some sort of identity for the next 3 games. That would be sort of the ideal realistic outcome, I guess.
Sounds like an incredibly low bar.
I mean, I guess they cleared the lowest bar imaginable by getting 5 points from the 3 games. So that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah. I mean, I think I'd give them like a B- for the position after 3 games and like a C or C- for how they got there.
Yeah, that's about right.
Yeah, and obviously you would, I don't know, I would rather see it the other way around, have the B- of how they tried to get there, and then the C- of the actual results.
Yeah, but if the goal is to qualify, and I mean especially like because it's so early, I don't know, I feel like this is a much different conversation if they have 2 points, right? Like, and I think maybe in reality it's actually not like positionally, but I think the tenor.
Do you think it's a different conversation if they beat El Salvador and then tie the next 2 games?
I think it's pretty similar. I think the 5 point. I mean, for me, I think I also think because so much of this team has been about the culture and also just about like the results. Like they won what 15 games in a row in CONCACAF or something, and it was like could not stop tweeting about it, could not stop celebrating it, even though like I'm sure
they're still undefeated.
Yeah, like
won the Nations League, a trophy that doesn't exist.
They won that. Yep, and won the Gold Cup. Like I think because 5 points, especially given where everyone else is an okay result. I think probably is not a different conversation. I think although I think the Honduras first half was real concerning.
Yeah.
That was
like that happened, and it like just happened in a game. Like the fact that they scored 4 goals in the second half is great, but like the first half is also a thing that just happened in a game and shouldn't really, needs to be factored in when you're kind of projecting the team going forward.
Okay, so I'm looking up the next round. So we've got Jamaica on October 7th, Panama, and then Costa Rica. And it looks like Jamaica and Costa Rica are home and then away to Panama. So, again, 9 points, right?
I mean, they're going to be favored in the betting markets to win each game, I would assume.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I mean, I think what I would love to see in those games is like, we've been having 1 or 2 of those core 5 on the field at the same time. Can we get it up to 3 or 4, and like best case, maybe all 5? And it looks like they know what they're doing and that they can score goals, and that we're not giving up big chances. Like it seems not the craziest thing in the world, but play simple soccer effectively and score goals. Like that's what we keep coming back to.
Yeah, like a game where they create better chances than their opponent would be progress over the last two games. I would say.
I think it'd be interesting to see how the conversation would change if, who is it, Robinson and McKinney, if one of those guys buries the header against Honduras or El Salvador, and then you have 7 points and 2 wins, and it's like, okay, it didn't go great. Like the Canada game is kind of garbage, and the Honduras first half is also still garbage. But like, I don't know. Again, to the results, like that, I think
exactly.
I think probably having I think it's also a very different conversation going into the Honduras game. So the first half probably isn't as bad in retrospect.
Yeah, I mean, if that happens, it's like 2 away wins, which is like, yeah, essentially
it's impossible,
equal to beating Brazil on a neutral field, beating El Salvador, and then you also have the like warrior mentality of like coming back in the second half. And, Berhalter like making all these changes and the team just blowing El Salvador out of the water in the second half. So, yeah, I think it'd be incredibly different. But I think ultimately, like, yeah, I think the results roughly line up, I think, with the quality of the performances, which makes it a little easier to talk about in some ways. So thanks to the U.S. for doing that. Really appreciate it. All right, well, maybe we'll do this again after the next qualifiers, because I think we're all very skeptical about how those qualifiers will go, and even if they go well, that'll be actually a change in how things have been going. So also be worth talking about. But thanks for coming on, Noah.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Andrew.
I now next time I need to, come up with a better display name.
Do you want to complain about Clint Dempsey finally verifying your quote on Twitter?
Oh my God. That was hilarious. The worst part that it was part of just like some brand manager at EA Sports FIFA was like, this is hilarious. But yeah, basically to give this context, in a story I did for The Ringer that Ryan edited, we worked a long time to confirm the quote that when Michael Bradley was trying to get Jurgen Klinsmann fired, it probably took honestly a year of reporting to confirm that Clint Dempsey actually said, I just want to score goals and go fishing. I wouldn't do this to your dad. And then Clint fucking turned it into an EA Sports promo. So, capitalism.
Well, also Clint wouldn't confirm that he said it, right?
Right, yeah. He never got back to us and wouldn't confirm it on the record.
But he confirmed it through EA Sports after you created the quote. And EA Sports would not be able to have that ad campaign if it wasn't for your reporting. So,
yeah.
I don't know.
I'm ready for my check.
I was going to say, exactly. Send him a check, send me a check. Honestly, send Noah a check. He deserves one as well. For putting through
listen to that story.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right, we'll end it there. Thanks, guys. Let's try to do it again in October. Until then, I will not speak to either of you. So be well. And
Bye, guys.
Thank you to Rob Antle for producing the show. Thank you to Parquet Courts for the intro and outro music. Thank you to you guys, the listeners. Enjoy the return of European soccer. We'll talk to you next week. Bye.